Today I'm going to be sharing with you one painting trick that's going to save you hours on your next paint project. I have used this for years and years. Every single time I paint, I've always got it on standby. Every paint party that I've gone to, I've made sure I have 2 or 3 of these on hand, because the common problem that I always used to have was that my paint parties or my painting projects were taking too long. I was spending hours waiting for paint to dry. And at my paint parties, I looked around and a lot of times the ladies were just sitting and talking, fanning their project with a paper plate or something and just waiting on paint to dry. So don't wait any longer. Grab your hairdryer from your bathroom, plug it up, and have it on standby while you're painting. This is going to save you a lot of time, and it might also save you a little bit of frustration, because if you're impatient like me, you want to just keep painting. And a lot of times if you're painting the second coat, it's messing you up because your first coat isn't dry. So let's talk about it. One of the most common mistakes that I see people making is moving on to adding their second coat, especially when they're painting the background of their project, when the first coat of their paint isn't even dry yet. And you may not realize it, but that second coat of paint is pushing that first coat of paint along with it. So it's not really sticking to it because the bottom is, okay, so let's imagine layer number 1 is still wet. Layer number 2 is going on top of it. Does layer number 2 have anything to stick to if layer number 1 is still moving? No. So while you're painting layer number 2, layer number 1 is still trying to slip and move around. You have to get your very first layer completely dry before you can move on to your second layer. Once that first layer is dry, you're free to go ahead and start adding a second layer of paint and continuing to paint on top of that. Now, if you're painting different colors, this can also cause a problem, because let's say, for example, you've laid down some brown and the brown is still a little bit wet, and now you're trying to add over the top of that a little bit of red or green, and those colors start to mix and muddy together to make a really yucky color of brown. You don't want that. Or let's say you have just painted an area, like let's take this door hanger for example. Perhaps you have just painted the bucket part of this and you're getting ready to paint this red leaf, but the bucket is still wet. If you're not a very experienced painter and you go to put the red around the edges of this leaf and it starts to touch some of this brown, it could cause the colors to kind of mix and muddy together along the edges of the leaf, which doesn't achieve a very smooth application. Now, there are times when you're painting when you may want your colors to blend together, and that would be okay. You don't always want to dry your project in between colors. So if you're going for a blended or a shaded effect, then that is perfectly fine. But if you want your colors to stay separate and not mix together, or you want to be able to layer your paint in such a way that it makes a smoother finish, like a more solid coat, then you definitely have to be drying in between. And by using a hairdryer, you're going to save a lot of time. Now, let's talk about do's and don'ts when drying with a hairdryer. The first thing you want to do is make sure it is set to warm. Cool air will work, but it's going to take longer. So I usually have mine set to warm or hot. You might want to start with warm. I don't know how hot your particular hairdryer gets. And then there's low and high setting. That doesn't matter so much, but it does matter how far away you're holding the hairdryer from your project. You don't want to hold it any closer than, let's say, 6 inches away. If you're holding it too close and you're holding it in one spot, concentrated, trying to dry that one little spot, you're going to cause your paint to dry so quickly that it shrinks up and then you have cracks in your paint. You don't want that. So hold it a good 6 inches away and keep continuous movement. Even if you're drying one little spot, kind of do like a sweeping motion, back and forth, up and down and around. Don't hold it on any one particular spot too long. So if you'll notice, when I'm doing a Facebook Live or a video tutorial, a lot of time my hand is doing this motion. That is to ensure that the heat is not getting concentrated on any particular one spot on the door hanger. It's continuously moving so that it just is evenly distributed. Another potential thing to watch out for is to, after you have dried it, one thing you'll notice is if you are using matte acrylic paints, my favorite is the DecoArt Americana paints. They are matte acrylic paints, so they don't have any gloss or shine in them. When they are dry, they won't be shiny anymore. They'll be nice and dull, and that's what you want. That's how you know that it's dry. One thing to watch out though for is if you have painted in an area and their paint is really thick, it may appear to be dry on the surface, but when you go to brush across it with a brush, you may knock that top layer off, and underneath it might still be wet because the paint is so thick that it's like it's kind of like a cake. When you're baking a cake, sometimes the top of the cake can look dry, like it's done, but if you put a toothpick in it, the inside, you'll notice if the toothpick comes out clean, your cake is done, right? But if the toothpick comes out and it has batter on it, your cake is not done. Your paint is kind of the same way. Now, I'm not saying to go put toothpicks in your paint, but I am saying to beware of how thick your paint is. If your paint's really thick, you may want to give it a little bit more time, and you are going to have to hold that hairdryer on it for a longer amount of time, but continue to keep that motion going so that you're not drying it out too quickly in one spot. Now, if you're having a hard time getting a smooth finish when you're painting and using a hairdryer, you need to keep in mind that before you begin drying your project, you need to make sure and get those brush strokes smoothed out. So if you've just painted the entire background of your door hanger, a large area, and you still see lots of brush strokes in it, when you dry it, those brush strokes will still be there. So what you need to do is use probably the largest brush that you have, or, if you're using a large brush like this, maybe spritz it. I love my little fine mist spray bottles. Spritz it with some water first, after your paint's on there, while your paint's still wet, with just a tiny bit of water, not a lot, and a wet brush, and just kind of smooth those brush strokes out. Long sweeping strokes. I'm not talking like this. I'm talking long strokes where your entire forearm is moving to fill that area in, unless of course you're working in a small area. But you're going to want to smooth all those brush strokes out before you dry it, because once you dry it, they're there, and the only way you can get rid of them is by sanding them down. And sometimes that can cause more trouble than it's worth. If you've never used a hairdryer before when you're painting, I think you're in for quite a treat. This is going to really speed up the process that it takes for you to move from one thing to the next when painting a door hanger, which to me makes it that much more fun because I get to the next fun part quicker. And then if you're doing paint parties with friends or family and everybody is sitting around waiting for their paint to dry, have a couple of hair dryers handy so that you can walk over and dry your project in between steps and speed up the entire process, and everybody will be done in 2 hours instead of 4 hours. I hope you found what I shared today helpful. If you did, hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget to leave a comment and let me know if you began using a hairdryer in your painting projects. Hey, before you go, I wanted to invite you to take part in our upcoming fall workshop. It's called the Festive Flip Door Hanger Workshop, because we are painting not one but 2 sides of a door hanger. This will be a great project that you can hang up all through the fall and Christmas seasons. It's happening October 1st and 3rd. If you would like to come and join us, I'm going to take you step by step through the process of exactly how to paint this. I'm going to provide templates that you can trace onto any 18-inch wooden round. All you're going to need are a few paints, some painter's tape, and a few other supplies. You're going to be so surprised at how you're able to paint this by following a few simple, easy instructions. If you want to make things even easier on yourself, we do have a kit option that you can buy. It will send you the wood blank and even 3D lettering. If you're scared of the lettering part, this is going to make that so simple. You can sign up for as little as $10 right now by following the link down in the video description below. I hope you decide to come and join us for the Festive Flip Workshop, and I'll see you soon.